Good morning, boys and girls. Happy Sabbath. Isn't it good to come and talk to God in church? I talk to God all the time. What about you? Do you talk to God all the time? And He loves to hear from each of us all the time, doesn't He? But do you know that the Bible also talks about us coming together at special times and talking to Him? I'm going to tell you about 3 times in the Bible that I've read about recently where the people of God came together for special times of prayer. And then I'm going to tell you a story that happened in Africa. So the first one in the Bible is about Jehoshaphat. That's a big word, isn't it? King Jehoshaphat. Do you remember him? And the enemies of God came and they wanted to make war with the Israelites. Do you remember that? Do you remember what Jehoshaphat did? He said, what? He said, let's get together. We need to ask God. So he got all of Israel to come. And they prayed and they said, Lord, you are the creator. You take care of us. You are our God. And we have this temple that we can worship you right here. And we are depending on you to take care of us. All the boys and the girls and the moms and dads, everybody came together. And you know what? God sent a message and says, the battle's not yours, it's mine. And that means you're not going to have to fight. I'm going to take care of these people for you. And he did. So the people went out singing and praising, and God took care of his enemies. And then there's another story that you might remember more. Do you remember Queen Esther? And what happened with Queen Esther? What? Yeah. There was a man named Haman, and he wanted to get rid of all God's people. And he tricked the king into signing a law that all God's people would be destroyed. And Mordecai said, Esther, you've got to go to the king and get him to do something. So you remember what she said to Mordecai? She said, okay, I will pray with my maids here in the palace, and you gather all the Israelites that are in Shushan, and we're going to pray for 3 days. And then she went into the king, and that's a long story, but the short part is God did provide a way to take care of his people. And then there's one out of the New Testament. Do you remember the disciple Peter? Yeah, who can forget Peter, right? Peter was put in prison. Herod wanted to get rid of him, and he had decided he would kill Peter. But because there were some things going on, it was called the Passover right then, he said, I'm going to wait. And you know what the people in the church did? They did what Jehoshaphat did, and they did what everybody with Esther did. What? Exactly. They prayed. Everybody came together, and not only did they prayed all night long. So much so that when the angel came and got Peter out of the prison, and he went and knocked on the door, they were still praying, but God answered. So those are 3 times that are when God asked us to pray together. Our story today is coming from Africa, right here in this part of Africa. Can you see that? Right in there. there was a lot of unrest. People were not being nice to each other. We call it civil war. And some people did some things that weren't very nice, and the government said, you can't live here anymore. So they exiled them all the way over. From where they lived right there, they made them move all the way over here. That's hundreds of miles away, and they had to leave their families, and they couldn't come home anymore. They had to live over in that part. Well, after 17 years of living there, they got to know Jesus through the Adventist message. And they gave their hearts to Jesus, and then they got to thinking, what about all our family and our friends that are back in our old hometown? We want to tell them about Jesus. So they thought, what can we do? I know, we'll save our money, and our Sabbath school lessons, we'll take and translate those into the language that they speak, and we'll send them with our own money back to them. So they took their Sabbath school lessons and they translated them, and they got some other little pamphlets and little booklets, and they translated them, and they were sending them back to where they came from, to their family and friends. And you know, after a while, they started hearing, oh, they've learned to love Jesus too, and they're following Jesus the way he asked them to. But there was nobody from the church that could go and teach them more about Jesus. So they were praying, Jesus, send somebody over to where we came from. We can't go. So you send somebody from the church to teach them. 16 more years of praying went by, and finally they says, oh, our family and friends are getting old, and the church still hasn't sent anybody. We need to have a special prayer meeting. So they came together and they prayed a special time all together. And Jesus answered, but he still didn't answer right away. It was still 4 more months. And then something very unusual happened. Jesus answers very unusually sometimes, doesn't he? Yeah, he does. Well, the person that was the ruler there where they were living, all of a sudden, he went to the governor of the Congo and said, I want you to pardon these people, these Adventist people. And you know what? The governor did. And they could go back home, and they could tell their friends and their family more about Jesus themselves. So what I want you to always remember is Jesus loves to hear from you all the time. But there are some times when Jesus wants us to come together in a special way and pray for special things. You may go back to your seats now.